Are you ready for a show that talks sports from the fans' point of view?
We've seen Michael Jordan score 37 points a game in his era. How many could he score in today's NBA?
There's not a player out there who I'd rather have than LeBron James.
Are you ready for a show that isn't afraid to challenge anyone when it comes to sports? If Adam Silver really wanted to fix tanking in the NBA, he would stop rewarding teams by giving them the best chance to win the draft lottery.
I mean, how many times will Roger Goodell drop the ball on handling domestic violence in the NFL?
Look, athletes have every right to talk politics, but if the fans stop tuning in, that's their right.
Then you're ready for Talk Back, a podcast where two fans debate the media narrative and discuss the world of sports as we see it.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to another edition of Talk Back. It's our first edition of Season 2. That's right, it's episode 201. We're looking forward to all of the changes in Season 2, but before we get to that, we have a lot of NBA action to cover in Segment 1 this week. And then in Segment 2, we hit the talk-worthy subjects of the week. We've got a little bit of news out of Pittsburgh with Ben Roethlisberger wanting to play another 3 to 5 years. We'll get into that with them drafting Mason Rudolph. Then we've got an NHL player who's been notified that he needs to stop licking people. Justin, I don't know what to say about this story because I have never, you and I were discussing before the show that we've never been into a doctor's office, meeting with surgeons, meeting with people and saying, well, I'm sorry, this sales call didn't go that well. I guess I'm just going to lick you.
Wait, you've never licked one of your surgeons during a procedure?
No, I can't say that I have, and I can't say that it's even crossed my mind. That's just the weirdest story coming out of the NHL. So we've got all of that and more on the first episode of Season 2 of Talk Back.
Well, it's time for Segment 1, and we have to jump right into the NBA playoffs. That is really what has dominated the news cycle here for now about the last month, as now we're getting ready to get into the conference finals. We are actually recording on Wednesday night prior to the tip of the Sixers-Celtics Game 5 in that series. The Sixers looked like they were on the brink of elimination. We'll talk about that here later on in Segment 1, but let's open up with the Cleveland Cavaliers. It is amazing what can happen between really two shows, and how Cleveland looked in the Pacers series, Eric, and now how they looked in this Raptors series. I told you last week what I thought was going to happen. When you saw the demise of the Raptors in Game 1, you could feel the sweep coming. And now it is 10 straight playoff wins for the LeBron James-led Cleveland Cavaliers over the Raptors. LeBron is creating more extinction among dinosaurs than the Ice Age at this point with what he has done to Toronto. And this could be the final nail in that team's coffin, which I want to get your opinion on here in a minute, Eric. But with the way that series went down, do you feel like, as a LeBron fan, you obviously follow the Cavaliers, do you feel like the sweep speaks more about the betterment of the play of the Cavaliers, or was this just the right matchup at the wrong time for the Raptors?
I'd say it's a little bit of both, and I've got to give you a lot of credit because you definitely called that. You said that it was going to be a sweep after that demoralizing loss that Toronto suffered in Game 1. I'm on record on this show as saying that I thought Toronto would win this series in 6, 4-2, because of the way that the Cavaliers as a team played against the Pacers. Because aside from LeBron James, and look, as we always talk about, I know I'm a homer for LeBron James, but I think a lot of people in the media even will admit that the way LeBron James played in that Pacers series was probably the difference maker in that series, because save for LeBron James, I think that team loses in the Pacers series in round 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going into round 2, I was thinking if the team as a unit plays like that, it's going to be Toronto in 6. I felt like DeRozan, I felt like Lowry, I felt like some of the pieces that they had on the bench of the Raptors team was going to be more than the Cavaliers could overcome if Love and Smith and others on the Cavs played the way that they did in Series 1. Now, with that being said, you saw what you saw in Game 1, which is a demoralizing loss for the Raptors. You kind of tried to comfort me and say, hey, get your blankie off, get your teddy out of the room. It's time to have some confidence because this Cavaliers team looks like they could sweep the Raptors. Sure enough, Justin, you were right, but a couple things. One, to answer your question, it wasn't just LeBron James in this Raptors series. It was a full-on team effort. In the first series against the Pacers, what a lot of people don't realize is they either love or hate LeBron James is that no other player other than Kevin Love, and he barely averaged double digits in that Pacers series, no other player averaged double digits in points in the Pacers series.
No one even scored 20 points, did they?
That's right. And so in this Toronto series, you saw a huge difference. You saw Kevin Love averaging not only more points, but more rebounds. He was much more fierce on the inside. Then you had all of your role players because Jeff Green, you had J.R. Smith, as we talked about, Kyle Korver. You had a lot of guys scoring in double digits consistently. Their shooting percentages were very low against the Pacers. Their shooting percentages were much, much higher against the Toronto Raptors, especially right there in that closeout game in Game 4 in Cleveland. J.R. Smith, I think, at one point was 6 of 6 overall, 3 of 3 from behind the line. Korver was 8 of 12. LeBron was over 50%. Love was higher than 50%. I don't think the Raptors can overcome a team when they're playing like that as a unit. Then you add on top of that the play of LeBron James, which was just as good in the Raptors series as it was in the Pacers series. And quite frankly, it was just too much to overcome. So, Justin, I got to ask you, you watch a lot of basketball. I watch a lot of basketball too. But on this show, you're definitely the basketball expert out of the two of us. I got to ask you, you said it in Game 1, it was a demoralizing loss for the Raptors. But as you watched the remainder of the series, as you said, between the two shows from last week to this week, have you ever seen an organization crumble at the thought of playing one player and one team like we've seen with the Toronto Raptors? Because now, if you count this year, last year, and the last 2 games of the series 3 years ago, the Cavaliers have won the last 10 games in the playoffs against the Raptors. The Raptors just can't do it. And so have you ever seen a team crumble like that? And moreover, what does that mean for DeMar DeRozan, who was basically absent in this series?
Well, I mean, obviously we talk a lot about recency bias on the show and social media and everything gets blown up, but Cleveland and LeBron clearly have Toronto's number and they are in their head, and that is for sure. And we actually talked, 5-6 weeks ago on the show, I brought up to you, how unlucky are the Toronto Raptors? They're going to be the number 1 seed, and then the Cavs are going to fall to number 4, and they're going to play them in the second round, and they're going to get beat. We talked about that on the show weeks and weeks ago that you could see it setting up. And now I'm starting to wonder, did the Cavs want to be the 4 seed because they play Toronto? Because they are absolutely no threat to the Cavaliers whatsoever. We saw it in hockey even, where the Capitals couldn't get over the Penguins for years and years and years, and they finally just did it this week. So you do see teams that get in players' heads. Even from when you talk about fantasy and daily fantasy, you'll see trends where players just annihilate other teams or they don't play very well with them. But for Toronto being a number 1 seed, all this build up on them, Eric, we talked about it, and I don't know what the media, I know that they have to hype stuff, but you could see this coming. That Toronto was a regular season built team. All the depth that they have, it doesn't mean anything in the playoffs because you're not going to play 10 guys and give them all 20-some minutes each. You see these lineups tighten up. Look at the box scores for some of these teams. Their starters are going 38, 41, 44 minutes. You get 2 or 3 guys to do that, there's just not a lot of minutes left. So guys like Jakob Poeltl, who played all these minutes, 22, 23, 25 minutes in the regular season per game, he was getting nothing. He wasn't even getting in some games. So all that depth, it didn't matter. And that's what happens. Cleveland just had better players. Toronto, frankly, doesn't have anybody that can stop LeBron. I mean, they were trying to put a rookie on him. LeBron's in his 15th year. You're going to put a rookie on him, and that's the best option you have? That's not going to work. And I thought OG Anunoby did a pretty good job in Game 1.
Yeah, he really did.
And I think LeBron went back and probably watched the film and was like, okay, I can expose him here. I need to do this better. And you just saw him play better throughout the series. So, and I told you this through texting back and forth. Toronto and really any team that plays LeBron, you got to decide before the series, are we okay if LeBron scores 60 on us? Because what you can't do is let LeBron have one of those games where he's at 43 points and 14 assists. He can't get himself involved and get everybody else involved too. Like Game 4, there's things like that are going to happen where everybody just shoots the lights out, and you have to know beforehand, okay, are we okay if LeBron has 20 assists, but we can sort of keep his points in check? Or are we okay if he scores 50 or 60, but he only has 3 or 4 assists? He can't do both. And Toronto seemed like they didn't know which way they wanted to go. Possession by possession, they changed. Okay, we're going to let OG stay at the top and single covers LeBron, stop everybody else. Then he gives up a drive. Next possession, now we're going to hard double LeBron. He kicks it around, 2 passes. Korver gets an open shot. You've got to stick with your strategy, because if the Cavaliers go 5, 7, 8 possessions and no one else is touching the ball, it's just like when you play pickup ball. If one guy's dominating, do you want to go back and play defense and kill yourself for him? No, but if everybody's involved, you're getting buckets, you're getting your hands on the ball, you play better defense, you see that rise. That's what teams, they've got to understand what your strategy is. You got to either stick with it for the game or a half or something. But what Toronto did, Eric, was just absolutely ridiculous. You just can't switch your strategy in the middle of a game, because then you allow everybody to involve. LeBron's rolling. You're going to get crushed, and that's what you saw happen with Toronto. So they've got a lot of issues on that Raptors team that, frankly, from a salary cap standpoint, I don't know how they fix them.
Yeah, and you just said the lineups tighten up. The depth doesn't matter as much in the playoffs. And so now we see DeMar DeRozan, their highest paid player on that team. He was going to be budding superstar this year. They really thought he was going to go to the next level.
Eric, he was an MVP talk by some people as a top 5 candidate.
You're right. And now we're talking about a guy who was pulled and benched in the fourth quarter.
And got as many minutes as you and I did
of one of the games. And so I don't know where Toronto goes with that. Lowry went out in public this week and said, doesn't matter what we did in the regular season. This season should be considered a complete failure. So, Justin, now you have Lowry. Now you have DeRozan. The two didn't get it done this year. They didn't get it done in past years. And now you have all this salary there. I'm not really sure what the Raptors do at this point. We probably aren't going to go into it a whole lot here, because even speculating it, I'm not sure is really worth it. I think we get to the offseason. We see what kind of trades they're looking. I really don't know if those two guys are on this team next year. And that may seem a little severe, but I think you're at a breaking point in Toronto. You're at a point now where you've had these superstars on the team for the last 3 years. Now you've been the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, beating out the Celtics, beating out the Sixers, beating out the Cavaliers, and you really virtually did nothing with it. That's a big, big problem. And when you're DeMar DeRozan, I think you really have a serious consideration to make as far as not only your own play, but how your role on this team fits in when you're supposed to be the MVP type superstar.
Well, I think DeRozan's the only guy that they can actually move because of his age and the fact that he's really locked up with them through 2021. I mean, why would you want Lowry at 31 years old? He's going to hit the books next year for $31 million and then $33 million the following season in his 30s. I don't know if a team would necessarily want that. I think DeRozan at 27, though, already signed up for the next 3-4 years. I think somebody would be interested in that. I think the bigger problem for Toronto is they have like Serge Ibaka, who's locked up for the next 2 years at $20+ million. And Ibaka doesn't do anything now from what he did with that Oklahoma City team. He's not a guy that's worth $20 million a year. I don't know if a team, if they can do anything with that deal. Valanciunas is at $15 million. That's probably not too bad based on the NBA and the cap for that hit and what he does for them.
You know what was a problem with him, though, is you saw Kevin Love dominate him in this series when they were matched up head-to-head in the paint, and Love's a smaller guy, so that was a little bit of an embarrassment for Toronto that Love was able to dominate him.
And Valanciunas is watching them play, and again, doing daily fantasy every night, and he's all over the board. They'll have games where he's in, from a DraftKings standpoint, he'll be in single or low double digits, and then the next game he'll have a 40 or 50-point DraftKings night, which is a big double-double, for example. You just never know what you're getting out of him. He kind of reminds me of like a poor man's Vucevic from Orlando, where he's all over the board. But I think I don't know if anybody's going to want him at $15 million.
Yeah, you're right, and that's a little bit about today's NBA, isn't it? Because back in the days, our glory days of watching Michael Jordan, that era, you didn't see Patrick Ewing or Shaquille O'Neal or Hakeem Olajuwon or those guys, David Robinson. You didn't see those guys have such high peaks and valleys. Those guys playing in the paint were pretty much good all the time.
Yeah, and again, it's now you get these stretch 4s and 5s, big guys that can't really step out and shoot a 3, more or less, seem like you like to put for the Cardinals, the dinosaurs of the NBA. It's just you've either got to be extremely dominant, down low, or you've got to be able to step out and stretch. And Valanciunas sort of falls in that where he can step out and hit a jump shot, but he's not a three-point threat. He's just a guy inside, just a banger. And you saw Love sort of have his way with him, really, with him and Ibaka. They really didn't have an answer for them. So I think the only thing they can do is if they decide to break this team up, it's got to be DeRozan. and try to offload Serge and DeRozan in the same kind of deal.